Well, hi, welcome to the Habitual Excellence podcast. I'm Mark Graban. We're joined today by Steve Spear. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good afternoon.
It's good to talk to you. Can you tell the audience, the viewers, a little bit about what you do? You do a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you. So, by affiliation, I'm on the faculty at MIT in the Sloan School. Have an advisory practice called the High Velocity Edge, which is the same title as my book. More generally, I think my career has converged to the singularity of advocating for the scientific method. And unpacking that a little bit, my work started 20, 30 years ago trying to understand why there were some organizations, Toyota in particular, which were just these fantastic outliers in their ability to harness the contributions of people towards common purpose, create value. And Toyota was and actually still is the standard setter in their sector. Mm-hmm. And what we found in looking at Toyota was that they had constructed, ideally, all work as a series of nested experiments from which not only did they make the product or deliver the service they wanted, but they were constantly learning whether they succeeded and especially if they failed. And what we've discovered when we looked elsewhere is that other anomalous super performers took a similar approach. It was sort of a convergent evolution that even though they may never have collaborated in thinking about their own personal management theory, they came to the same conclusion. And so I'd say the last 15, 20 years, I've worked with organizations of a fairly broad variety, .com, .edu, .org, .mil, trying to look for opportunities to build this very, very rich feedback environment by which every day, not only you're doing the work that sort of your title or role suggests, but also you're creating useful knowledge that has longer term application. So, yay, science.
It's a good thing, obviously much needed. And, a part of the approach of Paul ONeill, the founder of Value Capture, was an advocate for, problem solving and the scientific method in our work and so much more. But, as he passed away in April, in his mid 80s, he had left Alcoa, where he'd been CEO until 2000. He was in the George W. Bush administration for a year and a half, almost 2 years as Treasury Secretary. And, a lot of people may have lost track of what he was doing since. And you worked with him, you knew him a long time. So it would be good to hear, some of your stories and reflections on some of those things you collaborated on and what you learned and what you'd like to help pass on.
Yeah. So let me start with the pass on first. I think, and again, it's a shame, Paul was a national treasure. I think it's no exaggeration, probably an understatement to say there are tens of thousands of people who lived and are living much better lives than they would have because of his influence. And not an exaggeration, and probably damning him with faint praise by saying it that way. Paul, to really boil down as parsimonious as I can make it, had two key beliefs that I absorbed from him. I think he probably had others, and I probably was too dense to absorb them. But the ones I absorbed from Paul were, one, that everybody matters. And you don't have the right, because of your station in life, to dismiss other people as mattering less or mattering differently. And I think probably tightly coupled to his belief that everybody matters, Paul also had a belief that no matter how good things are or how bad things are, they can be much better if we tapped into people's individual and collective ability to discover new things and create answers to longstanding questions and generate solutions to perplexing problems. and just as a quick summary as to why I feel I have right to have such conviction in sort of summarizing them that way. I probably met Paul, so it had been 20 plus years ago. I was completing my studies as a doctoral student, trying to unpack or decode Toyota's DNA. And we came to this realization that Toyota was this unique organization, or certainly unusual organization, that viewed its management system as existing to tap into the problem-solving ability of people so they could better meet society's needs. And it happened to be that those needs were transportation needs, but they really viewed their management system, and still do, as this mechanism for tapping into people's innate potential. And while we were doing this work with Toyota, Alcoa, under Paul's leadership, was making this real concerted effort to achieve perfect workplace safety. And wouldn't you know that the approach they were taking was so in concert with Toyota's approach that it created the opportunity for conversation and collaboration. So Paul and I, our relationship goes back to the late 1990s, continued while we helped try to stand up the Alcoa business system within the company. After his retirement, it extended to his being champion of the healthcare initiative in the Pittsburgh region. And our relationship continued both during and then after, when he was Secretary of the Treasury. So anyway, that's just some background to back up the claims I was making.
I mean, do you have some thoughts on, because I've heard different versions of the story, the story from different people, of how Alcoa had sort of gone on a search to find partners to learn from, and it seemed like that turned out being Toyota and Harvard Business School, and that there were kind of mutual interests and learning in all directions there. Is that fair to say, or how would you?
Yeah, that's fair to say. So I've had like remarkably good fortune, good luck in I'd say finding mentors. It's not even that. Having people who, for whatever reason, chose to mentor me. And amongst those, certainly I just fell into the opportunity to learn from Clay Christensen for at least a decade. He was on my committee when I was doing my dissertation. He was senior faculty in the same group where I was junior faculty for 6 years. And he had a huge influence on me. Another guy who, again, just, the dumb coincidence that I happened to be in the right place where he was at the right time, and he decided it was worth his time to develop me as a scholar and a person, who was Kent Bowen. Mm-hmm. And just to, give you, some real, put Kent in some perspective, he was brilliant enough, early enough, to have a full career, achieve full tenured status at MIT, and retire as professor emeriti at MIT, join the Harvard faculty in the business school, and have a full career long enough to retire as professor emeritus at Harvard. Guy's freaking brilliant. Yeah. And it turned out that Kent, before he became a management theorist, was one of the world leaders in ceramics. And I think it was by the coincidence of Kent having a very long-standing relationship with some of the geniuses at Alcoa in the material sciences that when we started looking at Toyota, connections he had on very different topics became the doorway for us to start having conversations around management theory too. And it turned out that at Alcoa, there was a guy also a savant, this guy Keith Turnbull, who was curious about this stuff, and by good coincidence was Paul ONeill's emissary and representative on these topics. So anyway, that's kind of the connections.
Yeah. So you've featured, or one of the organizations you featured in your book, The High Velocity Edge, was Alcoa. I was wondering what are some of the common threads that connect these different organizations like Alcoa and Toyota and the U.S. Nuclear Navy, and there's commonality. If you could talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of like nerding out in this, unpacking, science often starts with trying to explain the anomaly. And the references you just made to Toyota, Alcoa, and the Navy's reactor program are anomalous by enormous means. So let me just quantify that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So Toyota came to the attention of U.S. managers, U.S. academics, I guess in the mid-'80s, when after a few years in the U.S. market, they just started grabbing enormous amounts of share and putting the fortunes of the big three in a great predicament. And the reason was quite simple, was that Toyota was able to deliver cars at a far more affordable price with a much higher reliability level than anyone else in the world. And in terms of affordability piece, for example, Toyota's productivity was probably double. No matter how you measured it, it was double what was the world standard. So that was one anomaly, and we can go into it. They still maintain their anomalous behavior in a very, very difficult competitive sector. Alcoa, the connection there was they were another one of these anomalous examples in a very, very different setting, right? So heavy industry versus discrete part manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. But what they had done is take these industrial processes, which are so hostile to the well-being of human beings. Melt point of aluminum is well over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The crush pressure on a die extruding door frames and window frames, who knows how many thousands of pounds per square inch. I mean, these are processes designed in such a way that they're completely incompatible with human well-being. And yet Alcoa had figured out their processes so well that they were the safest employer in the country. And not like the safest heavy industry, it wasn't like amongst other people working with molten aluminum or molten metal. They were just the safest, safer than libraries, consulting firms, hospitals, etc. And then the third example you mentioned is the U.S. Navy's reactor program, which start thinking about the proposition. I mean, this is screw it, right? All right. So first of all, take radioactive material, put it into an engine. All right. Run that engine so it generates, ungodly amounts of electricity. Take that same engine, which we all know is difficult enough when you put it on land, put it inside a ship, sink the ship, and have the ship driven around by a crew, which in the day of 100, 150 people on board were all young men. And oh, by the way, don't give them any windows. And when I try to impress upon people about how cockamamie a proposition it is, I said, if you're not at all queasy with the idea of men in their late teens, early 20s, driving around at top speed in a nuclear-powered submarine, go home tonight, hand the keys to your newest car to the local teenager and blindfold him. And how do you feel about that? So anyway, the reason I bring that up is that the Navy, that program took the idea of nuclear propulsion from just like, oh, that's a good idea, when the science didn't exist, the technology didn't exist. They brought it into practice in this completely anomalous way, is that not only did they get to market before the Soviet Navy, but since the launch of the USS Nautilus in the mid-'50s, the Navy's experience with nuclear power has been perfect. No reactor failure that's led to human harm or ecological damage. And you can't find anybody else who's done the same thing. So anyway, why juxtapose Toyota, Alcoa, and the naval reactor program in the same book? It's because they've done the same thing. They've taken what everyone else takes for granted is the constraints, et cetera, and the hazards of a sector. It's proven that those are actually the limits of that type of work.
Yeah. And, this idea of a perfect safety track record, makes me think of something Mr. ONeill talked about a lot, the idea, the values-based idea that, nobody should ever get hurt when they go to work. I've heard one of his former colleagues say that had actually evolved to the idea that people should leave work healthier than they were when they arrived in the morning.
Yeah.
But this idea of thinking of zero harm and what he called theoretical limits. Where does that fit into in your mind the habitual excellence equation? How important is that, and how do leaders best help theoretical limits not just become a slogan, but actually turn into something actionable?
So there are a couple of things here to unpack. Paul was an interesting guy in the sense that when you asked him a question, he'd give you an answer. And he wouldn't give you two answers. He'd give one answer in which both the ethical and the rational were tightly integrated. And I never figured out a way to separate the two. And in my recounting, because I don't have his eloquence, it sounds like they're separate, but they weren't for him. And so this issue about how someone arrives, Paul's view was that if someone were willing to give you a day of their life to do something that you found valuable, right? You were willing to pay them because what they were doing was valuable to you, then you didn't have the right to put them at risk. And again, that seems sort of contradictory to the whole idea of creating value through the use of things that are molten metal and, pressures and velocities like we were discussing. But he started there. And then he continued the thought, which was, if you are introducing risk into their life and at their well-being, then the reason you're doing that, either you're malicious, and he didn't characterize himself or his colleagues at Alcoa as malicious, or the other possible reason you're introducing the risk is because you simply don't know any better. That if you knew perfectly about what to do, the risk wouldn't be there. Now, just pausing on it, it's really such a profound statement, because so often people say, well, Mark, you got to understand, with all due respect, this is an inherently dangerous thing to do. And Paul's attitude was that it's not written into the fabric of the universe that this is a dangerous thing to do. The reason it's a dangerous thing to do is we just don't know how to do it in a way that's not dangerous. And so the reason it's dangerous is that's all we know how to do. And so this led into Paul's set of ideas about how do you persuade people that whatever they're doing, remember I said earlier, what was his core values, that everyone matters. Mm-hmm. All right. So you don't have a right to put someone at risk because everyone matters, and that things could be much better. So why are they at risk is because you don't know any better. All you know is how to put them at risk. If you knew how to not put them at risk, you wouldn't put them at risk. So anyway, this idea of theoretical limits played within the Alcoa environment into this pursuit of safety and this sort of impetus to learn. Because Alcoa is obviously a very process-intensive company, a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics. And you can actually do like you did in high school chemistry. You can do your conservation of mass and energy calculations as to how much energy and mass do you have to put in to get, X number of door frames and window frames out, or soda cans or whatever else. And so there you have what the equation you wrote into your lab book and what the accountants told you actually spent to get your soda can. And it's like, well, you have this much soda can and this much you put in. So where'd all the other stuff go? And the answer was it got dissipated by ignorance. Because if you knew perfectly how to turn energy and material into soda cans, all you'd have is soda cans. You wouldn't have this dissipation of value somewhere. So they use this idea of theoretical limit as a way to keep provoking people and say, if someone said, hey, Paul, Mr. ONeill, or whomever else, Mark, we've optimized this process. They say, all right, well, let's calculate the theoretical limit. And it's like, oh, crap, because you never work anywhere. It'd be like saying, oh, this is as fast as it can go. It's like, well, are you at the speed of light? Because that's as fast as you can go. It's like, no, I'm not, nowhere near the speed of light. It's like, all right, go back and learn something else. Yeah. So that's how some of those ideas tied together.
But, you talk about that mindset of I realize, people have this resignation or acceptance that, well, this is a dangerous industry and it's sad. And we wish it didn't happen, but it's dangerous work. And
what can you do?
What can you do? Well, we don't know yet. And I think you articulated this really well. We got to do something. Now, I want to talk a little bit about lessons that you might have for healthcare, because I think sometimes there is a similar sort of self-defeating mindset of, well, patients are just, it's sad and we wish it didn't happen, but some patients are bound to fall, or, our patients are sicker and they're bound to get infections. This is nature, this is medicine, this happens. And some people I know you've run across and worked with have realized, well, no, we don't have to just accept that. What can we do about it? That's the question. Let's do something, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts for healthcare around this?
Right. So there's, I suppose, good reason for people in healthcare to be accepting of the imperfections patients and care providers experience in the course of care being provided. The stakes are very high. Sometimes the lead times are very short. The situations can be very complex. And the situations are fragile. I mean, you're dealing with people who are less than in perfect health. And so when things go wrong, you have a lot of built-in excuses. Again, the complexity, fragility, lack of lead time, etc. But when you start, all right, so I understand the appeal of that argument, but it has two grotesque weaknesses. The first is empirical, and the other is empirical, not theoretical. But anyway, you can, based on reason. So the empirical evidence is that some people have taken those situations which are complex and fragile, et cetera, and they've made them perfect. They had central line infections, boom, no central line infections. That was an experience we had working together at Allegheny General Hospital with Rick Shannon. You had surgical site infections, boom, no surgical site infections. That was an experience or a transformation won by the folks at the Pittsburgh VA. You had patient falls, patients don't fall anymore. You have bed sores, you don't have bed ulcers, you don't have ulceration anymore. So you have the empirical evidence that these things which are taken for granted are solvable. But then you sort of get into the logical, well, how is that possible? Well, the thing about these failures which impact the well-being of staff and of patients is that no one ever gets hit by a meteorite. It's not like, whoa, where did that come from? When you start doing the retrospective, the postmortem on these things, what you discover is that the reason harm was done was the accumulation of a lot of small, regular flaws in the system that in the moment somehow amalgamated to create a harmful situation. So a bunch of years ago, this guy, Mark Schmidhofer, and I wrote an article in Annals of Internal Medicine. The Annals had done a series of case studies of care gone bad, medical misadventure. There was the guy who went into the emergency department and he literally fell through the cracks for about 10, 12 hours of getting pain untreated. There was a patient who got an invasive procedure. Her name was Mrs. Morris. She got one intended for Mrs. Morrison. There was we wrote about a case of a patient who, instead of getting a dose of heparin as an anticoagulant on a central line, ended up getting several doses of insulin, which ultimately led to her demise. And as we started to untangle these cases, what we found was tolerance for lots of little things which clearly were wrong, but because individually they never were severely wrong, people said, that's just the nature of the beast. If you pick up the wrong vial of medication, well, put it back, be careful next time. If you get the wrong patient or give the wrong instruction, all right, correct for that in the moment, but be more careful next time. And it turns out be more careful is just a horrendous line of defense. I mean, it's an awful line of defense against things going bad. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because you think about our immune system, the way our immune system goes, it's First of all, it sets up barriers against infectious disease, and that's why we have such, resilient skin, and we filter air as it goes in through our noses, et cetera, et cetera. And then our immune system work at that moment that an infectious agent, that the moment it hits our system, and it's just on the periphery, the immune system, it kicks in because it wants to get it before it has a chance, when it's still just sort of probing before it has a chance to penetrate. We all know, if we've had the experience of having a vulnerability, let's say a paper cut, and the infectious agent has penetrated, the immune system reacts to that with swelling, with bleeding, with oozing, whatever else it is, to contain the problem. So it's sort of an odd irony that the people in healthcare deal with the object of their intention, these biological systems, with these wildly evolved mechanisms for seeing little problems early and addressing them before they have a chance to escalate. And in fact, a lot of medical care, right, is trying to either compensate for the absence of those mechanisms or restore them if they've somehow broken. But then you have these organizational systems which don't have the same attributes. And not only don't they have the same attributes, there seems to be too often a lack of aspiration to have those attributes of a healthy immune system. And so, anyway, pushing back on that sector, one, there's evidence. There's science which says much better is possible. And not only much better, but much better and much easier. The other part is kind of the logic of the argument, which is, COVID-19 is a pain in the butt right now. But by and large, if it weren't COVID-19, in the moment we're being attacked by who knows how many billions of microorganisms right now trying to conspire for our demise. And we don't care because we've got immune systems which fend them off. So.
Yeah. But, what would you hope to see ahead of us in healthcare? And I realize, you might have had, I don't know how much that answer changes because of what we've seen happening in healthcare with COVID-19. But if you had a couple of, maybe a way of asking it is, if you had a couple recommendations for leaders that you wish would be followed widely and diligently, what would some of those recommendations be?
Actually, Mark, this is entirely thinking out loud, but I hope the experience with COVID-19 is an inspiration for what really can be possible. Because you start thinking about this in January, you and I had no idea what COVID-19 was. I mean, maybe there was something going on in Wuhan, but did you and I discuss it? I don't think it was part of our conversation.
No.
And then even in February, and I may get the dates and times not exactly precise, but more or less in terms of the flow. Maybe in February we say, "Whoa, man, they got a mess in Wuhan. I'm glad I'm not in Wuhan." And too bad for them, but good for us. We don't have that problem. And then, oh, by the way, we're gonna no travel from China. Well, that seems prudent, right? And then it was like I remember when this first became part of the president's conversation. He was having a Rose Garden or some other kind of press conference, and a couple of the guests, how they were going to deal with this, and rather than shaking his hand, they elbow bumped him. I mean, and that seemed to like the extremist response to this in the United States. Oh, we're going to not shake hands; we're going to bump elbows instead. And now we've been in 2 months of lockdown. 20 million people are out of work. The economy is shut down. We walk down the block, and you think people are radiating something. You don't even look at people, right? I feel like we're in a horror movie now, like that. If you see the movie the Bird Box, where this is, anyway, but yeah, it's like, oh, don't look out the window. It might get you. I mean, so. This thing came on us very quickly. Now you start thinking about what's going on in healthcare, which is confronted with this problem of what is it? What do we do? How do we detect it? How do we treat it? How do we contain it? The healthcare community and the public health community have been evolving their understanding at blinding speed, which is why in January, a lot of people didn't even know where Wuhan was. And here we are in April and May, and people are locked inside their homes. And you know what? I'm confident by June and July we'll be out doing something routine in our new normal. So anyway, where does that come from? Is that individually and as a community, medical professionals, public health professionals said, we have situations which clearly are suboptimal. Really, they're disastrous. And we don't know what to do. So what we are going to do is, rather than just throw our hands up in defeat, and rather than go back to old routines because they are not adequate, what we're going to do is invent stuff, test it out. The stuff that works, we're going to tell people about it, and the stuff that doesn't work, we're going to not exactly discard it. We're going to say it didn't work, but we learned something from it not working, and so we're going to move forward. Now, anyway, you start thinking about the learning dynamic that is going to get us from this severe collapse of the economy in April to what I hope and even have some expectation will be recovery July, August, September. Where does that come from? It's this relentless dynamic of discovery. And who unleashed and allowed that dynamic of discovery? It's the leaders in healthcare who said, oh, these are the kind of problems we address. So anyway, you asked me what my hope is coming out of this is that they don't let up. They said, you know what? All right, well, COVID-19 we got under control, but wrong side surgery we don't. Well, let's treat that the same way. And surgical site infection, we don't have that one under control, but let's treat it the same way as COVID-19. Let's attack the problem with this laser-like focus on learning about it every day. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a really inspirational thought around, as you put it, evolving and learning rapidly. I have a friend who's an ER doctor who's said over the last 2 months how much the emergency medicine community has learned about responding to patients, how much the intensivists and the other specialists who are in the ICU have learned, and their treatments have evolved rapidly as they've learned. And it sounds like a lot of this happens through various networks, formal and informal.
Right.
And I think back to something you talk about, and value capture has learned from you of we need to see, solve, and share. And we've seen this massive problem of coronavirus, COVID-19, and people are solving things and they're sharing with each other.
Right.
And it would be great to see more of that related to issues that you said that are still going to be there: pressure ulcers, hospital-acquired infections, post-surgical infections, wrong site surgeries, medication dosing errors. How do we evolve and learn rapidly instead of repeating the same mistakes that seem sometimes over and over again?
Absolutely. So Mark, I think that the necessary transition here, and you see it in a lot of places where people are doing science, and I'm going to be kind of quite literal in the metaphor. And in order to do science, they got a lab bench, and they're like wickedly inquisitive and wickedly experimental on the thing on the lab bench. Now, in order to do the work on the lab bench, there's instruments, and while everyone is incredibly experimental about the object on the lab bench, some people, not everybody, are experimental about the instrumentation itself. Oh, what if I tune it this way? What if I tweak it that way? What if I try to use it from this different configuration? When you go from the lab bench to the instrumentation to the enterprise, we lose our bias towards experimentation. But if the thing on the lab bench is a complex dynamic unknown, and the instrument we're using is a complex dynamic unknown, certainly the enterprise, which is trying to engage the efforts of dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of people using all that complex stuff, that's a complex dynamic unknown also. But for whatever reason, the people who train up in the sciences and in engineering and all these other disciplines which advocate for and reward the curious mind, as they get further and further away from the lab bench, and more where the responsibility is not the bench or the instrument, but the enterprise, the bias towards experimental inquiry and discovery, it dissipates. And I think that's an unfortunate consequence of too many decades of telling managers that their job is to lead by setting objectives, or to give commands and then audit for compliance,
right,
or to managed by, combination, again, setting objectives and having metrics, kind of an up or out, like with Jack Welch back in the day. And it's unfortunate because I think it obscures the reality that these social constructs called organizations also have a tremendous amount unknown and a tremendous amount about them, which can be discovered if we had the same inquisitive intent we have for what's on the bench top or the workbench. So anyway, I do hope that there's some reminder and some recollection coming out of this COVID crisis that this is just how we should conduct ourselves. And it's not just, we're done with that and now back to our routines and which break all the time, but we work around those problems.
Well, well said, and really a lot to think about. So thank you, Steve, for thinking out loud and sharing your thoughts. It's really helpful to hear.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And Mark, I do appreciate the chance for you to roll out the soapbox for me to stand on and rant and rave. Because I've been with my family for the last 2 months, and I think they're kind of a little sick of that, from their own perspective. But more seriously, I think the encouraging word here, and really channeling what Paul's beliefs were, which is much better is possible, and we achieve much better faster the quicker we are to recognize what we don't know and can't do, and get on with it. And boy, I'll tell you, he was not a man of excuses, and not a man of excuses. If something was bad, it was bad. And if it was bad, it not only did it need to be fixed, but it could be fixed. So get on with it. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Well, one phrase he used a lot is I've been reviewing some of his speeches and recordings, and we're putting some of those into an ebook to capture that for people who want to take it in that way. He would say the role of leaders is to remove excuses.
Right.
So why? And he talked about, as you alluded to earlier, we're going to have zero harm at Alcoa, and people would give him all the reasons why that wasn't likely or wasn't possible, and say, well, the role of leaders is to help people eliminate those excuses and learn how to figure out that better way.
And Mark, I think that's a great one, because what Paul said could be confused with these stupid cliches. But in his case, they were neither cliches nor stupid. So one is, I don't want problems, I want answers. Well, for the manager who says that, who only wants answers, not problems, like, what the hell is your role?
Yeah.
I mean, if everyone has the answer, why do you even exist? Why do you even have a job? Country club membership. I think what Paul was trying to get to is he wanted problems, but what he didn't want was you to explain to him why the problem had to exist. Mm-hmm. He wanted a path forward to make the problem disappear. And the thing he wouldn't be tolerant of, and he wouldn't allow you, was the excuse as to why you couldn't try to move forward. Yeah. And anyway, really different from the cliche it might have sounded like.
Yeah. So, Steve, thank you again for sharing thoughts and reflections here. I do want to mention again for the listeners and the viewers, really do recommend Steve's book, The High Velocity Edge. You can find that on Amazon and fine bookstores. And Steve, if people want to come learn more about your work, what's the best place to come find you online?
Yeah, right now I think the best is we've created some tools that support this high velocity learning dynamic, and so we got a bunch of stuff posted at the website is www.c2solve.com. Not a lot of creativity on the browser name, but SEETOSOLVE, c2solve.com, and there's more information there.
That's probably good you didn't get too creative with how to the letter C, the number 2, the ampersand. No. C2solve.com.
Yeah, I'm a fairly literal, linear person, so that would have been beyond my capability or my understanding.
No. But again, our guest has been Steve Spear. I want to thank everyone for listening and watching. And Steve, thank you for joining us here today.
All right, Mark, thank you, and much appreciate you spreading the word about all these good ideas that we often get to discuss.